Hello again, everyone. Welcome back. This is a market update for the week ending Friday, July 25th. And we're going to start off here with the S&P 500, and I'm going to take a look at the SPX and the SPY. So on Friday, the S&P 500 was up 25.29. Just continues to trend, continues to push. We're getting a little bit of divergence here on the RSI. And on the weekly, it was up 91.85. So yes, sitting at new all-time highs, closing highs on the weekly and on the daily. Now, the one thing I've noticed in the same picture on the SPY, right? So the numbers are a little bit different, of course, but it's the same picture. Now, one of the things I noticed here, look at the candle on Thursday. The range on this candle right here, $2.16 from high to low. That's it. Now, when I scanned back and I looked at the ranges and looked at anything that looked like it might be close, you got to go all the way back to where? You got to go all the way back to February 14th. 2 days before the high, the peak in here, before we got a hard down in March and April. So it's really, really interesting to see, what do we get now? I mean, we've had 1 day after that really, really compressed range that we had on Thursday. We're getting overbought. And when I look at the Elliott wave picture in here, and this is the same count I've got on the SPX, and actually it's the same count that I've got on the NDX, and on the Dow Industrials. Actually, visibility, I want less than or equal to 1 day. I don't need it on the weekly. So let's take a look at the weekly view. So here's what I'm looking at. I'm expecting a wave 2 pullback. Now, how sharp will it be? How long will it take? I don't know. I know what I typically look for. I typically look for a 50% retracement. Sometimes you get it, and sometimes you get a lot more. You have to take a look at the wave count as it starts to break down. But so far, we haven't had the price action break down yet, right? So when I look at the daily count, here's what I'm seeing. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then within the fifth wave, and by the way, when you check this looks like it's longer than 3, and it may be, but 3 is longer than 1. So 3 is not the shortest wave. So we're fine. Everything's fine on the wave labeling in here, on the impulse wave structure. So we're looking at the 5th minute wave, what we call the little red Roman numerals, and looking for 5 waves within here. And I think we're in that 5th wave. Now the real question is it how much further is this going to continue to push in here? We're in, just even when you go on the daily, we're right at the, where we're getting divergence. Now, that may disappear if we continue to push Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll see. But as of right now, we've got what looks like some divergence on the RSI. So my wave count says, hey, we're almost there. A little compression showing up on Thursday, right near the peak, kind of like what it did back in February, right here. So it's going to be real interesting to see what we get this week. And this week we got a Fed meeting Tuesday, Wednesday, and we got Mag 7 earnings coming out Wednesday and Thursday. I think it's Wednesday and Thursday. Let me double check. I know it's Thursday, but yeah, it's Wednesday and Thursday. We have Meta and Microsoft on Wednesday, and we have Apple and Amazon on Thursday. So yeah, we're gonna get some fireworks, and right in the middle of the earnings season. So we'll see what happens in here. But that's the picture we've got on the S&P 500 right now. Let's take a look at a couple of indicators. And well, before I go there, let me just show you a couple things I've come across this week. So this was a really interesting article on the Financial Times. It's not fear, it's fear, not greed. Sorry about that. It'd be nice if I could read. that drives the stock market. It's fear, not greed, that drives the stock market. So they're talking about how they believe it's FOMO, and I think I bet they're right. It's the fear of missing out that's also going to lead to the fear of loss that's going on in the market right now. And it kind of gets back, they talk about a Charlie Munger quote where he said, "The world is not driven by greed, it's driven by envy." And I thought, wow, that is a really appropriate and kind of feeds right into this whole thing about FOMO. And so they go in and talk about various things. And of course, they set the stage on the background. And, like right here, U.S. stocks are at record levels as a proportion of GDP. This is, Warren Buffett's famous indicator, taking stock market capitalization as a percent of GDP. Well, look at what we're looking at. The United States is in the dark blue. The UK is in the red. And here, it's like, here we are. So here's 2021, okay, when we got, the craziness was going on and led to the peak into January of 22, okay? And then we had the pullback in 22, and now here we are again, we're higher. Well, all of this activity is well above anything that we achieved into the beginning of 2000. And, you look at this and say, well, wow, we all know, things are stretched, valuations are stretched, or whatever. It doesn't really help with timing, and which is why price action is what drives everything. And you've got to, be very, very aware of what is happening with, the current trend, the price action, et cetera. And then they come down, they give another perspective over here, the markets, what they've done in the rally since quote unquote Liberation Day. And then there's another, and so they've got some real interesting discussion in here. Here's that Charlie Munger quote. They talk about, the back to the South Sea bubble and, what Isaac Newton did. I didn't realize he was involved with that, but it was kind of interesting. That he sold out at 100% profit for £7,000 and was later then, several months later, infected by the general mania, jumped back in at a higher level, ended up losing £20,000, equivalent to about 3.6 million in today's money. So, yeah, I mean, it can suck you in pretty easily. And then the interesting comparison here too, between Bitcoin and gold. So what they've done is they said, okay, let's take a starting point at the beginning of 23 and say, okay, that's where they both, whatever their price was, is equal to 100. And what have they done since then? And here's what Bitcoin's done, and here's what gold's done since January of 23. So you can see why people are looking at this and going, oh, well, gold's kind of boring. Let me get into Bitcoin. And that brings up another thing, another little tweet I came across. Where is it? This by Jesse put this out. This is from Barron's article. I think this is this weekend's Barron because he just put this out today. And they're talking about tales of FOMO. So he's talking about a guy who had a friend who was a dentist. He said his buddy, after 1999 and tech stocks and everything, went through the whole bust and the tech bust. He went back to dentistry and swore he'd just be a passive investor forever. Well, in 2025, he's back actively trading Bitcoin in between root canals. Surprise, surprise. And then we talk about, all the different things that are going on, some of the, the things that people are participating in. And this supposedly saying he had a friend who was told by his millennial son that, hey, all that matters is that you could buy something for a penny in the morning and sell it for a nickel after lunch. Long-term investing is so yesterday. So kind of interesting in dynamics in terms of what's going on. And I'm sure there's just hundreds and hundreds of more stories very similar to that. All right, let's take a look at a couple of indicators. So in terms of any fear in the market right now, The fear index is pretty low. It's sitting at 1493 on the CBOE volatility index, down 46 cents on Friday. So where did that close? That's the second lowest close of the year. Here's January 1 of this year. So we had a close in January at 1485, and here's February 14th. There's that date again. February 14th, the most compressed day, where I just talked about with the range compression. 1477, and we're almost there. So we're back in that neighborhood. Okay, so interesting stuff in terms of where that's sitting. And also the other interesting thing I came across, Helene posted this about all-time highs. So the S&P 500, as I just mentioned, sitting at new all-time highs, right? Fewer than 100 stocks on the NASDAQ are making new 52-week highs, 98 on Friday. This is what was happening back in November, December, over 400. Okay, so we're not even close to that kind of, dynamic activity in here. That's a pretty big divergence in terms of saying, what's driving the market underneath the covers. Okay, so I want to take a look at, we had two of the Mag 7 had earnings out on this last week. Let's take a quick look at Google and Tesla. So let's see. So they came out, I think it was Wednesday night. It was Wednesday. So they came out on Wednesday. Google closed at $190.23 on Wednesday. Gaps up at the open on Thursday. Let me zoom in a little bit. And then just sold off most of the day. Still ended up on the day and a little bit higher on Friday, up $1.01 on Friday. So it's still trending. It looks to me like this wants to continue to push and maybe close this gap right up in here. So the bottom of this day right here on February 4th is 202.81. So maybe this pushes another $9, $10 up and closes the gap completely. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's had a very nice run since that low in April. And then the other one is Tesla. Okay, so here's the chart on Tesla, and it closed on Wednesday at 332.56. On Thursday, the investors, traders basically said, nah, we really don't like the results. And it ended up closing at 305.30, had a low of 300. So we're going to see where we go with this. It looks like, it wants to head south. At first, I was thinking maybe we have some kind of triangle pattern going on, but I really am leaning into the fact that I think this thing has got more to go to the downside. And I think that's going to most likely get confirmed when we break this trend line right in here. So that's what I'm watching here on Tesla. And you could see, if you look at what's happened over the last, where's April 30th right here? It really isn't up very much at all over the last 3 months. It's really been chopping sideways. After it got a little bit of a bounce into the end of May, and then we've been going through all of this right now. But I would have to say the picture is not very exciting on Tesla, at least near term. Okay, that's it for this video. If you felt like the video was helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, hit that little subscriber button. And if you'd like more of this information, head on over to joehenches.net. Everyone, have a great week. It's going to be interesting. Talk to you on the next video.